The storm had passed, but the water refused to rest. Beneath the glassy surface of the Louisiana Bayou, something waited, something that didn't belong there. When Caleb Hart, a Navy veteran seeking silence, followed his loyal German shepherd Shadow toward a flash of color tangled among mangrove roots, he thought it was just storm debris. But when he pulled it free, the truth sliced colder than the river's breath. The life vest wasn't torn, it had been cut cleanly with a blade. That night, a dark boat without lights drifted past his stilt house and shone a single blind. The road ended where the earth turned to water, and that was exactly where Caleb Hart wanted to be. His truck coughed twice before dying in front of the old stilt house, its silver wood glinting faintly under the noon sun. The Louisiana humidity wrapped around him like a damp shroud, but he breathed it in gratefully. It was alive, unlike the sterile hum of ship corridors or hospital lights. Shadow, his German shepherd, stepped down from the passenger seat, tail sweeping once before resuming that disciplined stillness only service dogs seemed to master. The air buzzed with cicadas, a slow electric drone that filled the silences between the croaks of bullfrogs and the whisper of water brushing wood. Caleb looked at the wide porch overlooking the bayou and thought, this is where ghosts come to rest. He had bought the house unseen, trusting a satellite image and a promise of quiet. He didn't care if the place leaned or creaked, only that no one would ask his name. The day passed in a rhythm of small work, carrying boxes, checking the generator, sweeping cobwebs from the corners, while Shadow explored the property's edge. The dog moved like a shadow in motion, nose skimming the damp air, reading stories from the earth Caleb could never understand. By evening, the sky had turned amber and violet, clouds stretched like paint across a bruised horizon. Caleb stood on the porch, sweat cooling on his neck, watching the bayou glow with dying light. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about the Navy, or the explosion that had taken a boy named Miller and left only questions buried beneath sealed reports. He wanted to believe this place could wash that guilt away. But peace, he would learn, was a fragile illusion. When the night came, it brought dreams like broken glass, metal groaning, water flooding, a voice shouting his name from the dark. He woke choking, drenched in sweat, his pulse still caught in that half-world between sea and memory. Shadow's head pressed gently against his chest, grounding him back to the present. The dog's amber eyes were steady, knowing, alive. Caleb whispered a thank you that only half reached his lips, and the world outside answered with the low growl of thunder rolling across the bayou. Somewhere in the dark water, frogs fell silent. The storm came hours later, violent, cleansing, alive with lightning that burned silver across the swamp. And when dawn finally broke, the bayou looked innocent again. But in the morning calm, Shadow found something tangled in the mangroves, something orange that the river had carried to his door. And that was when peace died. The storm had left the world smelling of mud and metal, of roots and ghosts. Morning light spilled across the bayou in fractured gold as Caleb guided his skiff through the slow brown current, Shadow poised at the bow like a watchful statue. The debris field stretched for yards, branches, torn tarps, and a single orange flash wedged deep in the mangroves. Caleb leaned forward, hooked it free, and pulled a life vest dripping with silt into the boat. At first it looked ordinary, another castaway from some careless fisherman, but his hand froze when he saw the strap, cleanly cut, the fibers sharp and unfrayed. A blade, not time, had done this. His heartbeat thudded slow and hard, like a drum in a deep room. He turned it over in silence, feeling that old instinct stir again, the one that told him when something was wrong. "Not an accident, huh, boy?" he murmured. Shadow only stared at the vest, hackles slightly raised, a low sound rumbling in his throat. By noon, a police skiff approached, its siren absent, engine idling lazy. The man who stepped out was large and soft-bellied, his uniform tight across his chest. Deputy Cormier, his name tag read. He smiled like someone used to getting his way. "Mornin'," he drawled, eyeing Caleb's porch and the life vest laid neatly on it. "Storm washes up all kinds of junk. Ain't worth losing sleep over." Caleb nodded but didn't speak. Cormier nudged the vest with his boot, eyes flicking just a bit too long at the clean slice on the strap before forcing another smile. "People around here mind their own business, Navy. You might want to do the same. Bayou's got a habit of swallowing folks who don't." He tipped his hat and stepped back onto his boat. The propeller churned the water into a dark froth as he left. Shadow growled softly until the sound disappeared beyond the cypress trees. Caleb stayed still, jaw tight. It wasn't the words that unnerved him. It was the way the man had said them, soft and smooth, like an order dressed as advice. That night, he sat alone on the porch, the vest still on the table, glowing orange in the fading light. The bayou was silent again, too silent, as if listening. He should have ignored it, thrown it back into the water, and let the river eat its secrets. But the soldier in him, the one who'd buried a friend beneath official lies, couldn't. He ran a thumb over the cut once more and whispered, "You're not done talking yet, are you?" In the distance, Shadow lifted his head, ears pricked toward a faint hum on the water. A boat, no lights, moving fast. Then came the beam, a blinding white eye that swept across the porch, pinning them both in its glare. It lingered a few seconds, then vanished into the fog. The silence after felt heavier than thunder. Shadow pressed close to Caleb's leg. The message was clear. Someone knew he was looking. The next morning arrived heavy with heat, the kind that made every breath feel like wading through syrup. And yet the bayou was too quiet, too still, as if holding its breath after the previous night's warning. Caleb stood at the edge of the dock, the air thick with the smell of wet wood and diesel, Shadow sitting like a sentinel at his heel, amber eyes fixed on the slow brown water. The orange life vest lay on the porch behind them, a silent accusation. It wasn't debris, and deep down he knew it. It was a clue, and clues meant someone's story hadn't ended the way the world believed. He couldn't let it go, not after the way Deputy Cormier had brushed it aside, not after that blinding light that had pinned him like a target. So when he headed into town that afternoon, the decision was already made. He was going to find the truth, no matter what it stirred up. The diner was small, its walls stained with years of coffee steam and fried catfish, its air buzzing with the hum of ceiling fans that barely stirred the heat. The conversations dimmed when Caleb walked in, as if the bayou itself had followed him through the door. He spotted an old fisherman sitting by the window, a man with shoulders shaped by years of hauling nets and a face carved from leathered patience. Caleb ordered a coffee, then crossed to his table. "Name's Caleb," he said quietly. "Found something downriver this morning. Thought you might know about it." The man's eyes didn't lift until Caleb added, "A life vest, orange. Strap was cut." At that, the old man's gaze rose sharply, something flickering behind the pale gray of his eyes. Recognition, fear, maybe anger. "You sure?" he rasped. "Cut clean?" Caleb nodded once. "Then you found what's left of my friend," the man said. "Name was Reuben Stokes. They said he hit a log that the river took him. But Reuben knew every bend of that water. He didn't drown by mistake." He gestured for Caleb to sit, lowering his voice. "You want answers? Meet me by sundown. My place is downriver, follow the cypress bend. Don't drive. Folks around here got ears they shouldn't." When Caleb returned that evening, the sun bled copper over the horizon and the air smelled of spice and salt. Jules Landry, because that was the fisherman's name, had a pot of gumbo simmering on the stove and maps spread out across his table. Between spoonfuls of steaming stew, he told Caleb about rumors, of fake insurance claims, of men disappearing when debts grew too large, of quiet burials beneath accidents. When he slid an old, yellowed chart across the table, a red X marking the place where the bayou split like a forked tongue, Caleb felt that cold, familiar focus take hold. Reuben called this his lucky spot, Jules said softly. Said if I ever needed the truth, that's where it'd wait. Caleb looked down at the map, then at Shadow, whose ears twitched as if he too had heard the ghost in those words. Then we go find it, Caleb said, his voice steady. Outside, the night pressed close around the little house, and the bayou whispered back, ready to trade its silence for the truth. Morning mist blanketed the bayou, turning everything ghostly and still. Caleb steered the small skiff through a narrow, half-forgotten channel, the motor's low hum swallowed by fog. Beside him, Jules Landry clutched a faded map, his voice hushed. Reuben said no one comes this way anymore. Caleb said nothing. The air felt heavy, listening. At the bow, Shadow stood tall, his gray and white fur damp, amber eyes locked ahead, every muscle alert. When the trees parted, a split cypress stump rose from the mud like a scar. There, Jules whispered. Caleb cut the engine. Silence closed around them, thick and waiting. He checked his mask, patted Shadow's shoulder, and slipped into the water. It was cold, dark, and full of secrets. His flashlight beam cut through the murk, revealing the shape of a sunken boat, Bay Star. The hull was torn open, riddled with neat circular holes. Not rocks, not weather, charges. Someone had destroyed it. Caleb surfaced, gasping. You were right, he said, climbing aboard, water dripping from his sleeves. They didn't lose her. They buried her. Jules's face hardened as he looked at the twisted metal fragment Caleb held. Shadow growled low, eyes toward the mist. From far off came the faint rumble of an engine. Caleb's voice dropped. They're coming! Jules gripped the tiller, fear and resolve warring in his expression. The skiff turned back into the fog, leaving behind the wreck, and the truth the river had tried so long to hide. The first gunshot cracked through the bayou night, scattering birds and silence alike. Caleb dropped behind the table, the wood splintering under another blast. Smoke filled the small, stilt house, and the lantern's flame wavered, throwing long shadows on the walls. Shadow crouched low beside him, a gray and white blur of tension, his amber eyes fixed on the door. Outside, heavy boots thudded on the porch. "Come out, Navy boy," someone shouted. Caleb didn't. He waited, calm as a tide pulling back before the storm. The door slammed open. A man stepped in, too slow. Shadow launched, a flash of muscle and fury, knocking him flat. The shotgun roared into the ceiling. Caleb moved fast, disarming him, slamming him against the wall. Another figure rushed in. Jules fired once from the doorway, sending him tumbling into the smoke. Flames licked up the dock outside, reflecting red on the water. "They're burning it!" Jules shouted. Caleb lifted Shadow, who whimpered, blood darkening his fur. The house crackled, collapsing in sparks and heat. They burst through the back, diving into the skiff as bullets hissed across the bayou. Fire roared behind them, painting the water gold and crimson. Caleb held Shadow close, whispering, "Easy, boy. We're still here." And as the burning reflection faded behind them, the bayou swallowed the sound, keeping their secret one more night. Morning came soft and gold, laying peace where the fire had raged. Caleb sat in the sheriff's office, his clothes streaked with soot, his hands still trembling. Shadow lay at his feet, bandaged but alive, his amber eyes following every sound. On the table lay proof, the life vest, the cut strap, the twisted metal. The sheriff nodded grimly. "It's over," he said. Caleb didn't answer. He only looked at the dog who'd never left his side. Hours later, Jules arrived in a new white patrol boat named Pelican Watch. The sky shimmered with sunlight as they pushed off into the open bayou. Shadow stood at the bow, fur glowing silver in the dawn, the breeze lifting his ears. Caleb rested a hand on his back, his steel-blue eyes softening. "We're home now," he murmured. The river glimmered around them, quiet and forgiving. The swamp that once whispered danger now sang of peace, a hymn only those who have survived could truly hear.